This is a paper which I had written for the NLU J Law Review. It's one of India's one of India's top law review papers. Now, I had written an article on Charu Khurana, on the judgment by Justice Mishra on Charu Khurana versus Union of India, right? It was a fairly simple and straightforward case, and I had fundamentally brought out the shortcomings of liberal feminism, right? Shortcomings of liberal feminism. Now, the content of the judgment isn't that necessary, but I'll just brief you through it for you to be able to better understand what I'm trying to convey through this slide, right? So Charu Khurana was a foreign-trained makeup artist. She comes back to India, and she wants to be a makeup artist in the Bombay film industry. And of course, the Bombay film industry has a strong union, and the union says, no, sure, there is a gender division of work, right? So if you're a woman, right, you have to be a resident of the, if you want to be a member of the union, you have to be a resident of the state of Bombay for 5 years. And then if you're a man, you will be a makeup artist. If you're a woman, you will be a hairdresser. And obviously hairdressers getting lesser paid and makeup artists were getting higher pays. And that was the entire gender division of labor. Charu Khurana challenged this rule, and the Supreme Court looked up Article 14, 15, 21, and also looked up the Trade Union Act because the rule was engraved in their constitution and stated that a trade union rule cannot violate the foundational principles of the constitution, and stated that this rule has to go. It's a bad rule. It's a rule that represents misogyny. It's a rule that represents all sorts of problematic notions, and it reproduces them in the society in today's day and age. Now, the article which I had written in Asian was, again, I'm being very honest when I'm teaching all of this, is that I am a male, right? And I am a Brahmin, right? Now, what ends up happening, and this is something that I've realized over the last couple of years, is that what ends up happening is that we have certain biases which we tend to reproduce when we write, right? Which is something that you also have to take care when you're writing about something that are contemporary, right? That when you're writing about anything, as a matter of fact, right? So when I wrote about that through the lens of criticizing liberal feminism, I came up with an economic model whereby I proved that women were better off in a pre-Charu Khurana era and a post-Charu Khurana era. And when I phrased that in that manner, a critique against liberal feminism, it was not getting published anyway. And at the same time, after multiple rounds of rejection, when I rephrased the statement, when I rephrased my topic to something similar to Charu Khurana versus Union of India, an opportunity creation analysis post the judgment, instead of writing a critique of liberal feminism, when I rephrased the topic similar to that, I was welcomed into n number of acceptance of that particular idea, right? So it becomes fundamentally important to know that you have biases, and those biases should not reflect in the topic. Even if they reflect in the topic, you should make sure that your biases are veiled by the biases of the journal. So again, most of the journals in today's day and age, if you go and read a couple of articles on the same theme that you want to write on, you will get an idea as to what they publish, right? So there can be journals which will never write against liberal feminism. There can be journals which will never write publish in favor of the caste system. Again, I'm not placing a value judgment, or I'm saying that these are things that journals also have their ideology, which is reflective of the topics which they choose, which they want to get published and which they do not want to get published. Now, what ends up happening here, or what is it that I'm trying to say here, is something that's pretty simple, right? So when you, 1 second, right. So when you look into this particular case, right, and this is something that's very important. I have all of my notes here, and this is something that is very, very important, right? So a judgment like Charu Khurana speaks about the emancipation of women, right, who wanted to be makeup artists, right? So remember, you just, since the idea of topicality is important, it is not necessary for you. And what is it that I was trying to tell from my experience, right? So it is not just that you you have to approach a topic from a specific angle, right? One topic can be approached from multiple angles, right? So here you have the gender and labor law angle, right? So the gender angle would simply mean that there is something called feminism. If you want, I can share the. Please again feel free to write back to me. And there is, or please, if you want to read, just read something called feminist legal methodology, right? So that's the gender angle which becomes important. And even in that gender angle, there are significant contradictions between Savarna feminism and Dalit feminism, right? So it is not necessary that one specific approach, right? It is not necessary that one specific approach would. So if you take a feminist approach, it is not necessary that it would be the best representative factor, the best representative factor of that particular theme, right? It can be broken down into Savarna feminism. It can be broken down to Dalit feminism, right? It is for you to take your biases aside, right? And think what would be the best, which kind of approach would do best justice to, which kind of approach would do best justice to that particular theme, that particular topic. And then you also have the labor law angle, right? In this particular case, if you look into what the trade unions were doing, is that they were imposing restrictive conditions of work, which is something the unions have been doing since their inception. Because the main goal of unions were to reduce competition, right? If the main goal is to reduce competition, they are essentially distributing work between male and female. Now, the question which you could ask, and again, I'm not sure whether this will get published anywhere, but the question which you could have asked is, what if the union was distributing the higher paying jobs of makeup artists and reserving it only for women, and the lower paying jobs of hairdresser and reserving it only for males? Would that be discriminatory? Would that be violative of Article 14? Would that be violative of Article 15? And would that call for Article 21? The takers for that kind of research, conservative research, would extremely be narrow, right? I made the same mistake by phrasing it out. And if you fundamentally want to essentially increase your chances of research, I would strongly advise you to write as neutrally as possible, or if not neutrally, try lean to the central left, because the central left, my understanding of legal research right now is that more and more the articles which are coming out are more and more central left, right? So there is a critique, but there is also a hope that the system would improve, that this kind of critique would benefit the system instead of this kind of critique standing right against the system, right? And by system, I do not mean power, right? A system can be anything. When you're writing against a journal, when you're writing in a journal against what the journal believes in, that can be also against the system, right? Which brings us to the paradoxes of legal research, right? So if you remember, we were talking about the paradoxical existence of so many things, right? So here you have one phenomena, you have one example where so many contradictory ways of looking at it can exist. What would you want to focus, right? As a researcher, know that you are always biased, right? And having a bias is okay, right? It is established fact that bias is quite natural to human beings, right? But at the same time, you also have to remember that after you write or when you send it to the journal, it basically marks the death of you, right? So the person who's reading your article need not essentially read it through your lens, through your eyes, but they have to read it through their own eyes. And there it is, again, it's kind of a shooting a bullet in the dark or an arrow in the dark. You have to find out a way in trying to be biased, yet not look biased. So when you're framing a topic, of contemporary relevance, of course, the role of ideology will become significantly important, right? Which will bring me to the next slides. But your main task as a researcher, again, I gave you that example. So when I wrote against a critic of liberal feminism, the number of times it was getting rejected was innumerable. And when I started writing it, presenting it as a more economic term, opportunity creation analysis, the number of acceptance I was getting was significant.